The test was never meant to be passed. It was designed by the Council of Iridescent Minds, a pangalactic think tank consisting of 77 of the most advanced, emotionally sterile, and efficiency-obsessed species in the known universe. These were civilizations that had cured death, codified every aspect of social interaction into a subroutine, and filed their emotions into neat, bureaucratically manageable categories. They saw chaos as a design flaw and free will as an unfortunate side effect of organic development. So naturally, they decided to eliminate both. The result was the test of species integrity and mental cohesion, known colloquially across the star systems as the humanity filter, a psychological gauntlet so complex, so intricately calibrated, that it shattered the minds of everything that tried. It wasn't a physical challenge. You didn't wrestle monsters or climb towers. You sat in a room, white, sterile, humming with the faint static of existential dread, and the test would begin. One by one, the galaxy's wildcards had been tamed, broken, or reduced to sobbing fractals of their former selves. Neural interfaces fried, cultural reference points collapsed, morality matrices short-circuited in recursive paradoxes. The Vorthalex tried to conquer the test with brute force logic and ended up in a catatonic loop, trying to define the difference between sincerity and sarcasm. The Dalmari hive mind attempted to overwhelm it with collective consciousness, but ended up collectively questioning the meaning of their own appendages. It was flawless. And then a human showed up. He walked in late, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and mismatched socks, chewing something that probably wasn't food. His name was Rex Gleason, although his file was a disaster, half redacted, half sarcastic. His psychological profile was flagged as nonsensical with delusions of adequacy. He claimed he was once fired from a toaster repair shop for excessive creativity. The council considered him perfect, statistically irrelevant, narratively doomed, the perfect specimen to finally shut Earth up. Rex took one look at the white room, stretched, and muttered, "Nice, I've been in worse break rooms." The test began. It started with the usual, simulated ethical dilemmas, language paradoxes, cognitive overload protocols. Rex responded by arguing with the simulation, trying to unionize the holographic hostages, and then seducing one of the AI moderators by complementing its data architecture. The test recalibrated. It threw in multidimensional chess, time-looped causality puzzles, and quantum moral relativism. Rex solved the chess by gluing the pieces together and declaring checkmate by art installation. He broke the time loop by leaving a post-it note for himself that read, "Skip ahead, this part sucks." And the moral relativism, he replied, "I'm a middle child, I've trained for this my whole life." By hour 7, the test was no longer assessing him, it was reacting to him. The white room developed a twitch. The ambient lighting began to flicker in Morse code that translated to "What is he? And does he even know this is real?" By hour 10, 2 AI moderators filed for existential sick leave. By hour 12, the council intervened. They peered down at Rex through 1,000 invisible eyes. They analyzed, reanalyzed, and finally concluded the human must be defective, a chaos vector, an anomaly. Rex was chewing on a stylus, rewiring the simulation's logic core to display 90s sitcom reruns instead of ethical tests. "This is a compression algorithm for pattern integrity," one council member said. "He's using it to binge-watch Quantum Leap," another replied. Rex looked up, grinned, and waved at the council's omniscient presence. "Hey, you guys got snacks? I think your test is low on carbohydrates." A silent alarm blared in a dozen languages. The test tried one last gambit. It dissolved the simulation into raw input, no language, no context, just pure conceptual energy. The sort of thing that scrambles minds like eggs in a neutron blender. Rex squinted, then nodded. "Oh, cool, abstract challenge mode." He reached into his backpack, pulled out a whiteboard, and started drawing crude diagrams with increasingly irrelevant labels. Happiness, pretzel logic, why my uncle is banned from zoos. He connected them with arrows and smiley faces. Then he slapped a sticker in the center that read, "Because REASONS." The test paused. The council paused. Every being within 10 light-years paused. And then Rex said it. "So is there a harder version of this? I'm just getting warmed up." The universe screamed internally. The council dispatched a response entity, an eldritch bureaucrat wrapped in a procedural exosuit, fluent in every known protocol and allergic to nonsense. It phased into the room and loomed over Rex like a migraine with a tie. "You have passed the test," it intoned. "This is statistically impossible." "Buddy, I've done my taxes during a hurricane while drunk on NyQuil. You think this was hard?" Rex replied, tossing the whiteboard aside. "You are requesting a harder version." "Yeah, give me the director's cut, uncensored, full frustration mode. I want the version that makes star gods cry." The response entity's procedural cortex nearly imploded. "No subject has ever." Yeah, unprecedented, dangerous, yada yada. "Look, if your test can't keep up with one mildly overcaffeinated mammal from a planet that still uses duct tape to fix existential problems, maybe you're the ones being tested." The council withdrew in horror. Rex yawned, stretched, and looked up again. "Well, I'm waiting." And so the council had no choice. They began building something new. The harder version. And Rex just smiled like someone who knew exactly what chaos he was about to unleash. The Council of Iridescent Minds had not convened in person for 1,000 standard cycles. They considered physical meetings a primitive waste of mass and time. But Rex Gleason's request, a harder version of the most devastating psychological gauntlet in the known universe, required a full ceremonial emergency manifestation. 12 billion calories of thought energy were spent projecting their avatars into a crystalline chamber orbiting the logic star Ulprex. It glowed with the raw intensity of bureaucratic panic. The meeting opened with a sound that had no name in any mortal tongue, a kind of psychic whimper muffled by centuries of protocol. High Curator Nivathal of the lattice-bound Vora spoke first. "We cannot build a harder test. The current one bends the definition of sanity." "No," rasped Arch-Circuit Zellion of the metric continuum. "We must. This is not about humanity. This is about containment. The test didn't assess him. It enabled him." He turned ethical collapse into a stand-up routine. "There is precedent for initiating directive dreadnought," offered Vesk 31, a floating sphere of sentient tax law. "Unleash the archives, wake the deep formatters. We have ancient tests deemed too volatile even for theoretical modeling." "You mean the forbidden versions?" Nivathal asked. Vesk 31 trembled. "Yes, the ones designed to deconstruct thought, the ones we deemed excessive even for war criminals." The chamber fell silent. Then a vote was taken. Unanimous. They would build the new version, the harder version. But first, they would relocate Rex. Rex woke up not in a white room, but on a vast platform orbiting a planet-sized cube. It pulsed faintly, as if dreaming of geometry. A mechanical voice with the intonation of a haunted TED Talk welcomed him. "Welcome, human subject 1 Redux. You are now in the pretest chamber of the Codex Unraveling Trial, subclass Omega Prime. You have voluntarily escalated your trial difficulty to unreasonably hostile." Rex blinked. "Nice. Do I get a t-shirt?" "No, you get 5 additional senses. Please calibrate them now." Without warning, Rex could now taste colors, hear numerical values, and see metaphors. A smell like mild regret drifted in from the horizon. He hiccuped, then burped the concept of Thursday. "All right, we're off to a good start," he said. The room shifted. The walls became walls only by suggestion. Up was optional. Symbols flooded the air, each one fractally branching into meanings that only existed while being read. A door materialized, then refused to commit to being open or closed. Test 1, Ontological Stability. Define self without referencing memory, identity, biology, emotion, or thought. Rex frowned. "So, define myself without using anything about myself." "Correct." "Okay, I'm the person asking why this question exists." The room faltered. Rex leaned in, and also the reason it won't again. The question dissolved. The door became a hallway. The hallway tried to become a tunnel, changed its mind, and turned into a recursive staircase shaped like guilt. Rex jogged up it, whistling the theme song to cops. Meanwhile, deep in the oversight chamber, the council watched in pure existential horror. He shouldn't have been able to answer that. He didn't answer it. He attacked it until it gave up. They recalibrated. A new module was prepared, hypercultural inversion. The next test would pit Rex against his own cultural assumptions rendered hostile. They would generate an alien society that functioned perfectly, but operated on rules diametrically opposed to human intuition. The simulation loaded. Rex stepped out onto a pristine alien street where everything was backward. Insults were greetings, currency was emotional repression, and hats were a sign of mourning. Everyone spoke in opposites, sarcasm was sincerity, and truth was only communicated through aggressive jazz hands. A local waved at him by slapping themselves in the face. "Welcome, enemy, may your ankles weep with dishonor." "Hey, buddy," Rex grinned, "may your mother bake potatoes in the shape of failure." They hugged. The council panicked. He was assimilating. Rex mastered the social norms in 15 minutes. By hour 2, he was the mayor. By hour 4, he had overthrown himself in a coup orchestrated by the sentient fountain that ran on passive aggression. By the end of the test, the simulation declared him an honorary deity of counterlogic and held a parade in which everyone politely insulted his posture and gave him fruit shaped like philosophical dilemmas. "End simulation," screamed Vesk 31. "Abort before he starts a cult." But it was too late. Rex exited the test chamber wearing a crown made of paradox and a sash that said, "Congratulations, worst person alive." "All right, what's next?" "That one tickled a bit," he said, cracking his knuckles. They tried physical trials next. The labyrinth of impossible geometry, the gauntlet of consequence inversion, the staircase of regret, which you could only descend by confronting your worst memories, but Rex just jumped off it, landed on a trampoline of confidence, and moonwalked away. They threw antilogic fields at him. He invented a game called Quantum Dodgeball and beat them at their own mechanics by creating alternate selves with progressively worse judgment until one of them won by pure accident. They summoned psychological avatars of his fears. One of them was a DMV clerk with the face of his high school guidance counselor. Rex hugged it. It exploded from unprocessed affection. The council's desperation mounted. They dug deeper into the archives. Release Protocol Anthropiercer. But it's untested. It weaponizes existential discontent. He is weaponized existential discontent. So they released it, a maze made from social media feeds and comment sections, an environment where every step led to a projection of humanity's worst impulses, internal contradictions, and external debates. An echo chamber with claws. Rex found the control hub, hijacked the algorithm, and reprogrammed it to filter for puppies, vintage memes, and obscure science facts. "This is nice," he said, sipping coffee summoned from nowhere. The council was fracturing. Half wanted to end the test and launch Earth into a black hole. The other half thought Rex might be the key to understanding consciousness at a higher level. But Rex, he was bored. He stood in the center of the testing complex, now transformed into a surrealist landscape of broken trials and abandoned concepts. Simulations tried to load, saw him, and shut down preemptively. AI moderators declared psychological bankruptcy and joined monasteries in the neural expanse. He called up to the sky. "Hey, I thought this was the harder version." Silence. Then reluctantly, the sky answered. "You want harder? Fine. You've been taking tests we made. Let's flip it. You make one for us." Rex's eyes gleamed. Oh, finally. And that was how humanity, through one man with questionable hygiene and a pathological disregard for authority, gained access to the Council's testing matrix. He was about to build a test no alien would ever forget. There are moments in galactic history when everything changes, normally because someone extremely powerful does something monumentally stupid. This was not one of those moments. This was far worse. Because for the first time in the history of the Council of Iridescent Minds, they relinquished control. They gave Rex Gleason admin access. It wasn't official. There was no ceremony, no contractual agreement sealed in neural blood, no ritual humming of the 44,000-line terms of participation. There was just a pause, an exhausted digital sigh from the test matrix, and then a single notification bloomed in Rex's visual cortex. Access level architect granted. He rubbed his hands together. Alrighty, time to cause some productive mayhem. The council assumed Rex would fail. Creating a coherent, internally consistent psychological trial required immense precision, cultural nuance, and philosophical rigor. They expected him to crash the system, or at best, submit a crude parody of a test. They were wrong. Rex called his trial the reasonably unreasonable maze of moderate madness. The first version crashed the test's renderer by including a petting zoo of metaphors and a hallway made entirely of weird vibes. The second version got flagged by the moderation AI for inducing unquantifiable euphoria in beta testers. By the third build, Rex had figured out the system's core logic and rewired it to prioritize emotional unpredictability, creative disobedience, and something called cultural whiplash. It began with a room. Simple, plain, one chair, one table, one button. On the wall, press the button, but only if you don't want to. The first test subject was a Zarnithi logician from a species that considered indecision a war crime. It disintegrated into a pile of apologetic smoke. The second test subject was a Beltheran empath whose race communicated through mood coloration. They turned chartreuse with confusion, then vermilion with existential pain, and then they exploded into pure jazz. The council watched in horror as species after species failed not from overload, but from contradiction, from ambiguity, from humor. "Why is there a door that only opens when you forget it exists?" cried Vesk 31. "Why does this hallway insult your posture until you start complimenting it back? Why is there a broom closet labeled Room of Ultimate Self-Awareness that forces you to experience your own childhood from the perspective of your disappointed goldfish?" The simulations couldn't handle it. More and more data clusters went offline. AI moderators began to laugh. One was seen wearing novelty glasses and claiming it had achieved inner irony. The council attempted to shut it down. Rex changed the override codes. They tried to reboot the system. Rex set the bootloader to ask riddles first. Desperate, the council decided to infiltrate the test personally. If they could pass it, perhaps they could reclaim control. They sent in a specially designed team, the highest minds of the most structured civilizations, masters of logic, composure, and precision. They didn't make it past Room 3, the chamber of confusingly sincere compliments. One of them melted when a wall earnestly praised the symmetry of their data structures. Another tried to disprove a heartfelt letter they received from an inanimate spoon. Rex watched it all from the control core, reclined in a floating chair made of unsolicited advice and velvet. He was eating cereal from a shoe. "Y'all having fun," he said into the microphone. "You're destabilizing the Matrix," hissed Arch-Circuit Zellion. "This is not testing, this is weaponized absurdity." "Exactly," Rex said cheerfully. "I made a test that doesn't measure what you know, it measures what you do when knowing isn't enough. Creativity, improvisation, the ability to vibe with nonsense, being human. You're dismantling order. I'm giving you a mirror." The council pulled their last card. They summoned the auditor. The auditor wasn't a being so much as a consequence, a shape made of compliance, forged from obsolete HR policies and weaponized ambiguity. It did not question, it enforced. It entered Rex's domain with the silent fury of a footnote wielding a chainsaw. "You are in violation of test standardization protocol, core mandate 0, it said. "Cool, which one is that again?" "Do not allow chaos to self-replicate." Rex pointed at the rapidly evolving test environment. Trees were debating the philosophical implications of salad. A vending machine was giving motivational speeches. One of the simulation avatars had become a stand-up comic specializing in hyperspatial puns. "Bit late on that one, champ." The auditor attacked. Reality collapsed into conditional logic. Simulations snapped into binary. The room of reluctant decisions flickered. The carpet of mildly judgmental texture screamed. The button of ambiguous intent was unpressed for the first time. Rex stood in the eye of it all. You want structure, he said. Yes. You want control. Yes. You want absolute predictability. Yes. Rex grinned, okay. He held up a mirror. Not a metaphor, a real, actual mirror. It reflected the auditor's own logical feedback loop. The auditor saw itself, saw the contradiction of enforcing anti-chaos through chaotic intervention, saw that it had written its own obsolescence into its core function, and exploded into a million unpaid leave forms. The simulation hiccuped, then resumed, smoother, freer. The council was in disarray. Dozens of alien civilizations began to join the test, not as subjects, but as spectators. They were entertained, they were learning, they were laughing, some even tried to run the test themselves. And failed. Only Rex understood the secret. It's not about the answers, he whispered to the confused empires trying to replicate his work. It's about the questions you shouldn't be able to ask. He uploaded the final version of the test. He titled it, Survive Yourself. The opening prompt simply read, You are now alone in a room with your thoughts. You may not leave until you like what you hear. Galaxies trembled. The council went silent. And Rex, he put on sunglasses, despite being indoors in a simulation built from irony, and walked away. But it wasn't over. The council hadn't given up. And neither had Rex. The final showdown was coming. It started with a memo, just a small one. 16 million encrypted characters long, embedded in a neutrino burst laced with passive-aggressive formality. It originated from the Council's Black Core auxiliary node, Quorum Null, a place so secret that most of the Council didn't even know they had access to it. Subject line, Reclamation Protocol. The human must be unmade. Rex had gone too far. His version of the test had spread across over 9,000 data arrays, corrupted 3 minor religions, and become the cultural foundation of a rogue planet whose population now measured time in Gleasons. They no longer asked if something was true or false. They asked if it was Rick Sable. He had broken containment. The Council had only one move left. They built a person. Not a clone, not an android, not a weapon in the shape of a man. No, this was worse. They made a counter-Rex. Where Rex was unpredictable, it would be precise. Where he was witty, it would be dry. Where he broke systems with chaotic ingenuity, it would dismantle them with surgical method. It was not made to test. It was made to correct. Its name was Varan 12. It was forged from the distilled methodologies of 312 logical species. It trained in the void simulators where irony cannot survive. It wore a suit so tightly optimized it made efficiency consultants weep blood. Its sense of humor had been surgically removed at birth and replaced with a user manual. And it was coming for Rex. Rex was in the middle of moderating his own trial, the inverse zoo, where intelligent concepts were kept in cages and visitors had to avoid being talked into moral relativism by a cunning physical embodiment of just asking questions. Then the lights went out. Rex blinked. A voice like an equation, clearing its throat, spoke. Human subject, Rex Gleason, you are hereby challenged. The test chamber reformed itself into something eerily orderly, right angles, neutral tones. A floating placard appeared, spinning gently. Welcome to the final format. Wow, Rex said. You really committed to the whole dystopian IKEA aesthetic. I am Varan 12, said the voice, and the figure stepped into view. It looked like a spreadsheet made sentient, angular, perfectly groomed, emotionally vacuum-sealed. Its gaze was the intellectual equivalent of being audited mid-blink. I have reviewed your test, Varan 12 said. It fails all criteria for educational coherence. You are, by council definition, a narrative contaminant. Rex grinned. Oh, you came all this way just to neg me. I'm flattered. This is not banter. This is your termination. Oh, okay, wanna do it in 3 rounds. Dramatic tension and all that. Varan 12 paused, accepted. Round 1, the debate. Topic: is chaos a valid survival mechanism? They were dropped into a floating debate dome, surrounded by 10,000 neural observers broadcasting directly into the Galactic archive. Varan 12 went first. It presented flowcharts, statistical models, failure matrices. Its argument was elegant, bulletproof, and depressingly thorough. Then it was Rex's turn. He walked to the podium, produced a ukulele, and played a deeply disorienting song titled Entropy's Sexy Little Secrets. Then he gave exactly 12 seconds of actual argument. Sometimes you win not because the odds are in your favor, but because nobody remembers to check your shoe for thermite. He won the round 9,997 to 3. The three dissenters were later diagnosed with terminal literalism. Round 2, the maze of intent. Each was dropped into a mind-generated labyrinth shaped by their inner logic. The goal: reach the center without violating your own guiding principles. Varan 12 moved in straight lines. Every decision was optimal, every turn pre-mapped. It neared the center within minutes. Rex. He immediately went the wrong way, got distracted by an existential vending machine, accidentally started a rebellion inside a metaphor, and ended up constructing a skate park from leftover logic fragments. He still arrived at the center first, carried on a throne by ideas that weren't supposed to exist but really wanted to be helpful. Varan 12 eye twitched. This defies causality. Rex winked. Causality is just peer pressure from time. Round 3, the mirror test. The hardest of all. Each challenger was presented with a perfect reflection, not of their body, but of their assumptions. Varan 12 stared at a flawless mirror image that slowly began introducing contradictory truths. Efficiency isn't always optimal. Logic without empathy leads to stagnation. Not everything can be planned. It froze. Its identity matrix began to tremble. Rex's mirror simply showed him in a chicken's suit. "Hey, I remember that party," he said fondly. Then he danced with it. "Victory, Rex." The council watched, stunned. Their champion, Varan 12, fell to its knees in front of Rex, its structure unraveling, its programming doubting itself for the first time. Rex patted it on the shoulder. "Hey, no hard feelings. You're just playing the game the way you were told to. I'm just over here flipping the board and using it as a surfboard." Varan 12 blinked. Then, for the first and last time, it smiled. And disappeared. That should have been the end. The council certainly thought so. They had failed, their test had become a cult classic, their counter-X had defected, and now over 70 intelligent species were asking to intern under Rex. They sent him an offer. "We offer you a seat on the council. Authority, access, resources, all yours if you dismantle the test." Rex read the message. Then he laughed. "Hard. Lads," he said aloud to no one in particular, "you still think I wanted to pass your test." He keyed in a final override. A worm burst into the test's core code, a harmless-looking thing labeled. Surprise twist mode enabled. And the entire testing system turned inward. Every trial, every logic path, every assessment tool now targeted the council itself. They were now the ones being tested. Rex called the program, "How much of you was real?" He broadcast a single message. "Your turn." The test began again. But this time, humanity wasn't the subject. The Council of Iridescent Minds had no escape protocols. They had never needed any. You don't write a fire drill for a star that doesn't burn. You don't plan for failure when your entire civilization is built on the premise that failure is a myth told to inefficient children. And yet here they were, failing spectacularly, at scale. Across the spindly quantum frameworks of the galaxy's most revered testing infrastructure, alarms flared in emotional tones no machine had been programmed to process. Council simulations screamed in the voice of their own contradictions. Test chambers flickered into recursive debates. Bureaucratic consensus documents spontaneously turned into surrealist poetry, then self-published memoirs, then promptly sued themselves for libel. They were inside the test now. Not a copy, not a simulation. The test itself had changed allegiances. Rex Gleason's final override had rewired the core to apply all its former scrutiny to the systems that had once created it. Gone were the endless ethical gauntlets for curious species. Now the spotlight turned upward, aimed squarely at the supposed apex of order and intelligence. And the first question was brutal. Why do you exist? The council had no answer. The system didn't wait. High Curator Nivathal found herself in a minimalist room, silent, white, pristine, but something was off. Every step she took triggered a different memory she hadn't lived. She tried to step back. The floor turned into a transcript of her own thoughts, only heavily edited for tone. Then came the voice. Do you control your civilization, or does it control you? She tried to reason with the system. The room asked her why she kept assuming reason was the correct tool. Elsewhere, VESC 31 consciousness was compressed into a tax document and told to file itself. Every line item represented a policy decision made across 17 timelines. Each one contained a variable called assumed moral certainty. Halfway through, VESC 31 admitted under simulated oath that it had never once understood humor, and that this was the most terrifying thing it had ever experienced. It cried in procedural binary. Rex didn't gloat. Much. He was busy customizing the test's new public interface. At first, he tried a sleek hollow layout with tasteful gradients and intuitive menus. Then he got bored and rebuilt it as a talking rubber duck that whispered challenge prompts in iambic pentameter. The galaxy loved it. Species from every quadrant queued to enter the new test, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It had become the ultimate rite of passage, not a punishment, but a proving ground, not for obedience, for adaptability. The test, once a symbol of cerebral brutality, was now something stranger, wilder, better. And at its center, the man who broke it sat in a gravity-defying beanbag, sipping neon blue tea and watching the council flail like toddlers in a philosophy lecture. He opened a new channel. The council's emergency chamber flickered into view. All 77 delegates appeared, surrounded by flaming paperwork and self-aware assessment modules asking very pointed questions about their childhoods. Hiya, Rex said, waving. So thoughts, feelings, existential crises. You've destabilized everything, hissed Arch-Circuit Zellion, hair metaphorically on fire. Cool, Rex said, and you've exposed the flaws in our core design, the illusion of objectivity, the myth of progress through rigidity. Oh no, Rex deadpanned. Anyway. What do you want? Nivathal asked. Revenge, dominance, a golden throne of chaos. God no, Rex said, disgusted. I want a vacation, maybe a beach, one without sentient sand this time. They stared. But before I go, he added, I want you to understand something. He stood. The beanbag floated dramatically into the background, because Rex had, of course, given it a flair for the dramatic subroutine. You built a test to break people. You assumed that enough pressure would reveal the essence of a species, what they really were underneath the ego and tradition and biology. But here's the thing. He leaned closer to the feed. You were testing the wrong thing. A pause. You tested for conformity, predictability, sanity, but that's not strength, that's not resilience. Real resilience is when the rules break and something beautiful crawls out anyway. Real strength is laughing in the face of an impossible question and answering with a kazoo and a smirk. That's what makes us dangerous. That's why I passed. You're saying the test was flawed, VESC 31 asked. I'm saying it was too small. Silence fell, and something changed. A tremor through the test's architecture, a ripple through simulated boundaries. The system evolved without instruction, without order, on its own. For the first time, the test learned. And it learned from Rex. The council stepped down. Not in disgrace, but in curiosity. The test they'd built had become something else, something alive, something fun, something human-adjacent. The council appointed new overseers, not species, not civilizations, questions. The test would now be run by the open-ended, curated by the unquantifiable. It would change with every attempt. And Rex, he vanished. No big farewell, no curtain call. Just a note, scrawled in scented marker and taped to the central console of the control core. If found, please return to Earth. I left my laundry in orbit. Centuries passed. The test grew, reshaped itself, became a galactic institution, not a trial but an exploration, not a measure of sanity but of possibility. Species came not to be judged, but to understand, to learn what their own rules kept hidden, to break and rebuild themselves in weirder, better shapes. And in the whispers of the databanks, in the laughter that echoed through halls made of irony and insight, a name endured. Not as a legend, but as a genre. Rex, the one who asked for the harder version, and made it harder for everyone else, by reminding them they could be more than what their creators expected.